Imagine, for just a second, that humanity simply vanishes. No slow decline, no apocalyptic war, just gone. Welcome to an explainer that dives into a haunting, massive thought experiment based entirely on deep science. What actually happens to the Earth if the human engine suddenly stops? We are going to embark on a cinematic journey through deep time, looking at the exact chronological sequence of a world suddenly devoid of its architects. We aren't really focusing on how we disappear, but rather the breathtaking, completely unstoppable cascade of events that follows the exact moment we're gone. So, what happens when the human engine stops? Picture this, the ceaseless, overwhelming cacophony of modern life. The roaring highways, the hum of power grids, the deep rumble of subways goes completely silent overnight. 8 million people in New York City, billions across the globe, just gone. What you are left with is a highly engineered planet suddenly at the absolute mercy of nature. And nature, as we are about to see, works incredibly fast to reclaim what was hers.
Section 1. The first 72 hours. Now, the initial phase of a humanless world isn't characterized by beautiful overgrowth or peaceful silence. No, it's defined by the rapid, catastrophic collapse of our global energy grid and automated systems. Modern civilization is a system of constant, active intervention. Without us there to keep the plate spinning, the entropic chaos begins almost immediately. To really understand the sheer scale of our daily intervention, you just have to look beneath the surface of our greatest cities. Take New York City, for example. There are more than 700 pumps working around the clock down there, desperately holding back 13 million gallons of groundwater that naturally try to flood the subway system every single day. Without human operators to maintain the grid, those pumps fail. And within just 36 hours, those tunnels fill completely with water, eventually compromising the massive steel support pillars that are literally holding up the streets above.
But honestly, subterranean flooding is just the beginning of the chaos. Within a week, the cooling water in the world's 450 nuclear reactors, along with their adjacent spent fuel pools, will just start to boil off and evaporate. Without our oversight, this triggers a terrifying chain reaction of explosive meltdowns. Massive radioactive clouds will sweep across the globe. We're talking about a permanent chemical and radiological signature left on the planet's surface, devastating local wildlife ecosystems in a series of global Chernobyl-level events. Section 2. The biological shakeup. As the global grid completely dies and the skies darken with industrial fallout, a massive ecological crisis begins. And this crisis, it hits hardest for the species that we have selectively bred to depend entirely on our constant care and feeding. Nature's about to ruthlessly filter all of our biological creations, and the transition is swift and unforgiving. Highly engineered domestic breeds, the doomed, face an immediate existential crisis. Dairy cows, which we've bred to produce highly unnatural quantities of milk, will succumb to infection within weeks if they aren't milked. Broiler chickens will perish almost instantly. But on the flip side, the feral survivors, the intelligent, adaptable opportunists like pigs, robust heritage cattle, and large guard dogs, they're going to rapidly revert to their wild, feral forms. They'll form packs and completely dominate the new, silent landscape. Tragically, though, some animals represent the fatal cost of deep domestication. Take the modern wool sheep. We bred them to require annual human shearing. Without us, they'll quickly become completely immobilized by their own perpetually overgrown coats. They'll actually go wool-blind, totally unable to see predators or even forage for food, eventually collapsing under the suffocating weight of their own genetics. It's a profound, kind of heartbreaking illustration of how our engineering strips certain creatures of their natural autonomy. Section 3. The fall of cities. Fast forward a few decades. The radioactive dust has finally settled, feral packs are roaming the overgrown suburbs, and our built environment now faces its most relentless, patient predator, water. The destruction of a modern building isn't some dramatic explosion. It follows a brutal, inevitable mechanical sequence, driven largely by the freeze-thaw cycle. First, flexible window sealants dry out and crack. Second, water inevitably enters the structure. Third, as winter hits, that water freezes and expands by 9%, which cracks the surrounding concrete. This exposes the internal steel rebar mesh. That steel rusts, expanding to 3 times its original volume, exerting this immense outward pressure. And finally, this internal pressure simply reduces our mighty, seemingly invincible infrastructure to crumbling rubble. As the decades stretch into centuries, we witness a total, massive escalation of erasure. Within just 25 years, changing air pressure and failing sealants will cause the massive glass facades of our skyscrapers to shatter and plummet to the streets below. Within 100 years, the crumbling buildings create artificial topsoil, transforming cities into towering vertical forests. And by 500 years, the alkalinity of modern concrete breaks down entirely, turning our rigid urban grids into rolling, forested hills of debris.
Here's a really fascinating architectural irony for you. You'd probably assume our newest buildings are the strongest, right? But they're actually the most fragile. Sleeker, modern skyscrapers rely on incredibly thin glass curtain walls and tightly engineered steel skeletons. They are going to rot from the inside out and collapse long before overbuilt historic titans like the Empire State Building do. Those older structures are fortified by thick, heavy masonry. They were built before we could calculate precise tolerances, and that massive over-engineering, that's what will allow them to stand centuries longer than their modern rivals.
As all that concrete cracks and the subterranean pumps sit completely dead, the natural hydrological cycle is going to violently reestablish itself. In New York, the original 40 streams that once laced Manhattan will literally burst through the asphalt. Paved avenues like Minetta Street and Greenwich Village will transform right back into the flowing natural brooks they originally were, absolutely teeming with returning wildlife, eels and turtles. The rigid mathematical grid of the city will just dissolve back into a fluid living wetland. Section 4. The Plastic Fossil Record. Now, as our skyline fully collapses and is slowly buried by the accumulating sediment of a recovering Earth, our story shifts from human history to deep geological time. Because this is where the Anthropocene epoch leaves an undeniable, almost alien mark on Earth's strata. See, our civilization's ultimate earthly legacy won't be majestic, romantic ruins. It's going to be something geologists call technofossils. These are entirely unprecedented geological signatures composed of manufactured goods that have been buried and subjected to immense pressure over time. Future archaeologists, whether they are human or something else entirely, won't be unearthing intact statues or grand libraries. They are going to find a distinct, compressed layer of material that they'll undoubtedly find far more astonishing than dinosaur bones.
Because rather than the organic remains of leaves or bone, our specific fossil record is going to be overwhelmingly synthetic. We are talking about massive, lithified deposits of concrete, carbonized plastic films from single-use containers, and mummified synthetic textiles permanently trapped in oxygen-starved subterranean landfills. It is, quite literally, the lithification of modernity.
Just consider the sheer scale of this synthetic layer. We produce over 100 billion synthetic garments annually right now. Our discarded clothing isn't just trash anymore, it's geology. Down in the oxygen-deprived depths of our landfills, these materials won't decompose normally. Instead, they'll compress and carbonize, creating a permanent razor-sharp stratigraphic boundary of polyester and nylon circling the entire globe. It represents a complete, abrupt departure from millions of years of biodegradable natural history.
But, it isn't just plastic. Even our highly reactive metals will leave beautiful, ghostly impressions in the rock. While pure aluminum cans will eventually dissolve, they're going to leave distinct void spaces filled with unique clay minerals. Even more stunningly, the millions of miles of underground copper wiring that currently powers our internet and our cities, it will slowly mineralize. Under pressure, those wires will transform into brilliant, visually striking blue and green veins of malachite and azurite, perfectly mapping out the grid of our vanished metropolises deep within the Earth's crust. Section 5. Our final message in space. We've seen how the Earth will relentlessly crush, flood, and bury absolutely everything we've ever built here. Yet, the most enduring, intact human artifact in existence won't be found buried in the terrestrial mud at all. It is currently floating in the freezing, silent vacuum of interstellar space. Because over 15 billion miles away from the crumbling concrete of Earth, the twin Voyager spacecraft are still continuing their outward journey. Launched back in 1977, they have perfectly survived the brutal deep space environment. Long after our cities have fallen, long after the last suspension bridge collapses into a rising ocean, these fragile metal emissaries will still be gliding gracefully through the cosmic dark. And bolted to the side of these probes is humanity's ultimate time capsule, the Voyager Golden Record. Assembled in a frantic 6-week sprint in 1977 by a small committee at Cornell University, this gold-plated copper phonograph contains a meticulously curated snapshot of exactly who we were. It carries spoken greetings in 55 languages, the sounds of wind and rain, and the timeless music of Earth from Beethoven to Chuck Berry. And crucially, it was engineered to last for at least 1 billion years.
Now, NASA is currently forcing the Voyager probes to systematically power down their scientific instruments just to conserve a dwindling 230 watts of energy. But the golden record itself, it requires absolutely no power to survive. Even when the spacecraft eventually go completely cold and dark in the 2030s, the physical record itself is practically immortal. It has become a piece of permanent, cosmic infrastructure for our species.
The juxtaposition here is deeply profound. On one hand, you have earthly erasure, our home planet aggressively, violently wiping away our physical achievements using water, rust, and overgrowth, eventually burying our memory in a thin layer of plastic and crushed rock. But on the other hand, you have cosmic permanence. The cold, empty vacuum of space will flawlessly preserve this 1.5-hour audio time capsule, keeping our voices safe and absolutely pristine while our physical world dissolves.
Ultimately, the disappearance of humans proves something incredibly comforting, if you really think about it. It proves that the Earth has a boundless capacity to heal, to breathe, and to reclaim its autonomy. The story doesn't end with us. The planet effortlessly incorporates our chemical legacy, our synthetic plastics, those brilliant azurite veins, into its own endless, beautiful geological evolution. We were capable of profound change, for sure, but the Earth remains the ultimate architect of permanence.
Which brings us to our final lingering thought. 5 billion years from now, long after our reclaimed wild planet is eventually consumed by the expansion of a dying sun, our final golden greeting will still be drifting through the cosmos. It leaves us to wonder, as that golden record glides past distant stars, who might eventually hear our voices out there in the dark?